extremely exciting news for you and for myself. So in like 2 hours, I'm gonna go into an extremely interesting interview with a man called Robert Schwartz. He is a hypnotherapist and he works with soul regression. So he taps in, he helps people to tap into their soul. And he has written 2 books. So one is Your Soul's Journey and the other one is Your Soul's Gift. And honestly, I've been so afraid of doing this interview. And when I said this to my partner the other day, I was like, I want to cancel the interview. My partner was like, why do you want to do that? And then I got really emotional. I was like, because I'm so afraid of messing it up. And then my tears came and I was like, because this man changed my life. Like his teachings. I was supposed to interview this man 2 years ago and I didn't do it, but I booked the interview and I was really, really happy that he said yes. But because we booked the interview, that led me to buy his book because I just watched a lot of stuff on YouTube with him, but that led me to buy his book and start to read it. And it was like really intimidating because it's this thick, Your Soul's Gift. And I was just like leaving my marriage at that time and like I thought I was crazy and really going through this whole awakening process. And when I read that book, I brought it with me to Thailand and I was sitting there on the balcony, you know, listening to the ocean's waves. And I was reading it and I read a chapter of how we plan our lives with certain people so that we can in this lifetime heal past karma and how we're really supposed to be with certain people until we learn our lessons with them, and when we have learned the lessons then we can move on. And that was exactly what I needed at that time, needed to hear, and that helped me so incredibly much. So that actually led me to just really move on with my life very, very rapidly. And then I moved to Bali and really like live my life the way I do. So, but I canceled the interview because it no longer felt that it was important for me to do the interview. But then like now 2 years later, his name has popped into my head so many times, like, you gotta do the interview, you gotta do the interview. And I believe that's my soul speaking because it's so important. Like the message, this is why I've been so afraid of doing the interview, because I know that the message that this man has, it has changed my understanding. And it changed my reality with law of attraction. It changed my reality with how I think, how I see things, and why I grow so fast, because I see things so extremely different than I did before. So you are in for a real treat. So in 2 hours, I'm gonna go into the interview, and I just wanted to make this like intro before I dig in with him, because I don't want to waste his time before like when we start the interview. So I thought we do the introduction now and just say like, listen, take notes, and just know like this information will change your life when you get it, because then you will not have to be so frustrated from your life situations. Then you can understand them and grow from them. So, cut.
Hello.
Hey, Robert.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really, really well. We will see if I can see you as well.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I see it.
Yay.
Hey,
Wow, it's so good to see you.
good to see you too.
It's so fascinating, you know, when you've been watching somebody on YouTube or on television, and then all of a sudden you have them in front of you.
You know, the last video clip you sent, I wasn't able to get it to play, so I don't know what the question was that you asked.
Oh, the question was, okay, so maybe we will come to that later. I have already started to record. So we're just going to flow in what I did. So I have already made an introduction that I will put before our talk. So I have already told people about your books and that you do like soul regression and how cool it is. And what I also told them is that I've been so extremely nervous about doing this interview. And when I told my boyfriend the other day, I was like, I'm so nervous that I want to cancel the interview. And he said to me, he was like, why? Why do you feel so nervous? And then it came to me, I was like, because I'm so afraid of messing it up. And then tears streamed down my face. And then I realized, because your book, when I read it, it changed my life so much. So I really want people to get this understanding how the soul really plays a massive role when we are working with the law of attraction and live life to its fullest potential here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't mess up the interview. I mean, people understand that you're human, and they don't expect perfection, I don't think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how would you say, because your story, how is the sound? Do you hear me? Because I hear like an echo. Is that?
Oh, I'm not sure why that is happening, but the only thing I can do about it is to put headphones on. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, try and see if that works.
Hold on one second.
Yep.
Okay, how's that?
I think that's much better. Thank you so much. So the question that I sent to you and what I was telling people as well in the intro was that we were in touch about 2 years ago, and what I realized the other day, I was like, just because you and I were in touch, that led me to read one of your books, and that message in the book transformed because I was just going through a divorce, and I was thinking I was crazy for going through a divorce because the relationship was very beautiful, but I just realized that I wasn't in love anymore, and it really felt like I was coming out from the matrix, and it was like no way back. And then I contacted you, we booked the interview, and that led me to read the book. And when I read the book, I was like, this is it. Like that was exactly what my mind for the peace that I needed at that specific time. And then it came to me the other day what I was sending you in the video. It was that because we were also looking for people to translate your book to Swedish. That was in the state that you were in, right? So I was wondering, like, did that also have an effect on you in any way? That was what.
Well, you know, we're all connected. We're all actually, yeah, there's only one being in the whole universe, and you know, it's you, it's me, it's each of us. Each one of us is an individualized expression of the one. So everything affects everybody. It can't be otherwise. But obviously, some things have a bigger effect and ripple out farther than others, depending upon the strength of the energy and the intention behind it.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to say in regard to your divorce, it's my understanding that many, many marriages are planned before birth not to be lifelong marriages. You come together in a romantic relationship for two reasons: expansion and healing. And when those things are accomplished, then the energy that brought the two people together dissolves, and it's only natural at that point that they would go in different directions.
This is so beautiful. It's getting tears in my eyes. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think this relates very much to the topic why we are speaking today, because the people who are watching this are people who are very interested in live life to its fullest potential and understanding the manifestations. And what I tried to manifest in my ex relationship was to get pregnant, and it didn't work. So for 5 years, we were dealing with infertility, and the hospitals in Sweden, they actually offered us IVF for free. And I wasn't spiritual at all at that time, but it was a voice inside of me saying like, no, don't do it, absolutely not do it. That would feel as a rape on my body. So even though I consciously wanted a child, but I'm so extremely glad that I did listen to that little voice that I believe now is my soul that was speaking to me, because it was just telling me like, no, don't do it. You're in the wrong place. And I kept all searching for answers. And then I found hypnotherapy. And with the hypnotherapy and all the work I did with my subconscious mind, I realized that I was not in love anymore. Like everything changed. I started to be able to love myself. So he really came into my life, as I believe, to love me when I couldn't love myself. And then I could love myself. And as you say, the energy totally shifted.
It's good that you, in my opinion, that you heeded that inner voice regarding the IVF. The inner voice, you're correct, that is your soul trying to guide you. And sometimes the inner voice asks us to do things or take a certain course of action that doesn't make any sense to the logical mind. And there's a good reason for that, because the logical mind, the human brain, is basically a biocomputer. And as with any computer, the outputs are wholly dependent upon the inputs. Well, the inputs to the human brain come primarily through the five senses. That's really all the physical brain understands. It's a third-dimensional biocomputer. So when you start getting inputs that are multi-dimensional, like feelings from your soul that are intended to guide you, the brain doesn't necessarily understand that, especially if the guidance is asking you to do something that may seem on the surface not to be logical. So, you know, we talked a moment ago about how there's only really one being in the universe. God or source, whatever term you want to use, has a very long-term plan for each cell in God's body. And that's what we are. We're like cells in the heart of God. Well, the plan is so vast and encompasses so many years, so many lifetimes, that from your limited human perspective, you can't possibly know what the plan is. Nobody knows what the long-term plan is. So you have to just trust that inner voice, that feeling of rightness or wrongness about a certain experience. And if you follow that feeling, it will guide you in the direction that is consistent with Source's long-term plan for all beings. It requires a lot of surrender, acceptance, faith, and trust. But it sounds like you have that.
Yeah, on my journey, lots have happened.
Yeah.
and I've been working because that's what's so fascinating. I think like I've been doing the subconscious work for 3 years, and this is what I do for, like, I work with this. And when I started to read your books and I started to listen to a lot of your interviews, and when I like could combine this understanding of the subconscious mind, our ego that's trying to protect us the whole time, and I was like realizing, wow, there is a soul as well. That was like, it was so cool.
Well, this is what the times that I just want to say, this is what the times we live in are all about. We're, as a race, humanity is making a shift from body personality consciousness to soul consciousness. So prior to the current era, the vast majority of people were living lifetimes in which they were fully identified with the body, fully identified with the personality. They thought they are the body, they are the personality. And there are still many people on Earth who still believe that. But there's an awakening happening, and the awakening means you come to understand that you are more than the body, more than the personality, more than your thoughts, more than your feelings. You are, in fact, a divine, eternal soul. The body, the personality, the thoughts, the feelings, those are things you have while you're incarnate. They're things you carry. But as I like to say, just because you have a thing, that doesn't mean you are the thing you have. You know, if you have a horse, it doesn't mean that you are a horse. And by the same token, just because you have a body and a personality, that doesn't mean you are the body and the personality. You're not. You're the soul.
And how would you, so if people watching this now going through a process in their lives where they are very, very frustrated, and maybe they're trying to manifest something in their life, or like I did with a child, I really, really wanted that. And I thought consciously, like, this is the only thing I want. And I started to even identify myself with the woman who was not able to have a child. And like, in with all the work that I was doing, then I realized that, like, after a lot of work, then I realized the reason why I wanted children was so that I could feel unconditional love. That was like, when I dive deeper, that was the reason why I wanted children. But if somebody's going through a hard, like, crisis, what advice would you give in order to kind of ease that a little bit?
The main advice I would give would be to know that the universe is incredibly intelligent. It only brings to you experiences that are in the long run for your highest good, and to trust that. Again, we come back to faith, trust, surrender, and acceptance. The universe really is incredibly intelligent, incredibly loving, and the experiences it brings to you are highly personalized. In its infinite intelligence, it knows exactly what you need for your long-term healing and growth and expansion, and it brings that to you. Sometimes the things it brings are painful or confusing, but they're still intended to be for your benefit in the long run. The more that you know that, the more that you trust that, the easier it is to accept what comes and stay out of a state of resistance. And you really, really want to stay out of a state of resistance if you possibly can, because when you resist whatever the experience is, You're giving a big energetic no to the universe. Well, the universe doesn't understand that you intend to say no just in regard to that one experience. All it hears from you is no. And it takes it as a global no to all the blessings you want in your life. It takes it as a no to physical health, a no to abundance, a no to love, a no to spiritual clarity, a no to everything that you actually want to have in your life. So this is why it's so very, very important to reduce resistance in any way you can. And one of the best ways to do that is to know that the universe is loving, intelligent, and is bringing to you only experiences that are truly in the long run for your highest and greatest good.
That is so cool. And that is why it's so helpful when we start to understand that our soul actually planned this. So I want to come back to that question of how we plan it. But before, when you're talking about resistance, if somebody is all new to this and they're like, how can I know that I have resistance? What are the signs that we're resisting? What happens?
Well, there are a couple things to look for. One, of course, would be your thoughts. If you are thinking negative thoughts about a particular experience, that's a form of resistance. Thoughts that are negative would be things like, this shouldn't be happening, this should not be in my life, things should be going differently, things should be going much more smoothly. I'll tell you something, anytime you think about a particular experience, this should not be happening, that is almost always a surefire sign that it's something you yourself planned before you were born. So knowing that is a way to reduce resistance. Another very good way to know whether or not you're resistance is to check in with your body. Your body is a wonderful barometer of whatever is actually going on with you. So feel into the chakras. The chakras are an ancient energetic system. People can read up on them if they like. I don't want to go into it here. But if you just scan your chakras, pay attention to them, you'll feel perhaps tension or maybe even a sensation of physical pain. And particularly in the solar plexus chakra, which is just a couple inches above the navel, if you feel a constriction or a pain there, that is often an indication that you're in resistance to something.
I had that the other day, like for about 2 weeks, I've had some strange feelings in my solar plexus. And nowadays I'm so aware of my body, like I feel straight away when something shifts. So that's so cool. But then because I had been doing some hypnosis sessions where I met myself in the future, where I was this female, very powerful leader. And I was leading from integrity, from my heart, from like my core values. And then I started to feel very strange after the session, and a lot of anger arose as well. And I was like, what is going on? And I started to call it interesting. And I talked to my head. I was like, this is interesting. What is going on? And then I realized that I had a few relationships in my life right now where I had not fully been in my full integrity. And I didn't do it on purpose because I was not even aware that I was not in integrity. And I was not aware. But yesterday I became aware and I texted all of these 4 people and my whole energy shifted. So I think that's also one thing, like when we heal something that our soul is telling us, then the energy shift, right?
It does shift very much so. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did with the 4 people that you texted. In order to do something like that, you have to have a certain level of self-awareness. So again, monitor your thoughts, monitor what's going on in your body, look for negative thoughts, thoughts of resistance, look for sensations of constriction or even physical pain in the body. Those things tell you you're in a state of resistance. If you're in a state of resistance, you want to reduce it or eliminate it as quickly as you can. And a very good way to do that, again, is to trust the universe. Another very good way to do it is simply to know that you are the powerful soul who planned your life and the major experiences in your life. And you had very good reason when you planned those experiences. And a third way to reduce resistance, which might be the easiest and the fastest way, is actually just to go into a state of gratitude for anything. It doesn't even matter what it is. The frequency of gratitude is fundamentally incompatible with the frequency of resistance. You cannot be in a state of gratitude and in a state of resistance at one and the same time. So if you notice you're in resistance and you want to eliminate it, think of anything at all that you are grateful for. And this is the great thing about about gratitude rather. It doesn't have to be in regard to something major. You don't have to win the lottery. It can be something really small, like the way the sun feels on your skin, or the sound of a bird chirping in a tree. Shift your focus to anything at all that you feel grateful for, and that will pull you out of the frequency of resistance.
Wonderful. And I know that that was one of the things that really started to transform my journey. When I don't know if you're familiar with the book, it's called The Magic. It's from the author who wrote The Secret, and she then wrote a book on gratitude. And when I, for the first time, actually committed to do gratitude for 28 days, because before I had heard like, yeah, gratitude is good, and I believe so many people have heard gratitude is good and you should use it, but I never did. And it was because I was so much in the victim mentality, so it was really, really, really hard. I couldn't come up with even one thing that I was grateful for. And then I committed to do like, okay, I'm going to do this 28 days of gratification. And wow, things started to, like, everything just started to shift so much. And that is when I was introduced to all these inspirational things on online, and it just changed. So I know, Robert, like before you woke up to the soul and everything, you had a quite a, not a boring life, but a life that you can you describe a little bit of that story for the people who haven't heard your story, how you
Sure.
and everything.
I had a very unfulfilling life. I actually have a master's in business, and I was in the corporate world for a number of years. This is going back some 17 years now. I was doing freelance marketing and communications, and I found this to be very, very unfulfilling. You know, I used to tell people at the time that I thought if I fell off the face of the earth, my clients would hardly notice. They'd just plug somebody else into that role and carry right along. But I also had the sense that there was some kind of calling or purpose for my life. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't sure how to figure out what it was. I tried different ways to figure it out. None of these really helped at all. And so, almost out of desperation, I did something that I had never done before at that time. I went to have a session with a psychic medium. Mediumship is not part of my background. I wasn't even sure I believed in it, but I didn't know what else to do. And so the medium starts to channel my spirit guides, and I didn't even know what a guide was. She had to explain it to me. And she said, a spirit guide is a highly evolved being who helps you plan your life before you come into body and who guides you after you get here. So she starts to channel my guides, and they say to me, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I said, well, why in the world would I have done that? And they said, well, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now, the really impressive thing about what they then went on to do is that they knew what all of my major challenges had been without me telling them. So, as you can imagine, if you're talking to beings who know everything about you without you saying anything, it gives them a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
So they went on to explain in some detail why I had wanted to have those difficult experiences. Well, I came out of this session with my mind just blown by what had happened. And I thought about this constantly for weeks afterwards. And for me, it actually created a very deep healing because it allowed me to see for the first time the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of my biggest challenges. So when I noticed that it created this healing in me, then I thought, okay, this is a concept that could bring a similar kind of healing to other people. That was when I first started to think about writing a book on the subject. And then within just a few months, all sorts of things happened. I started having spiritual, metaphysical experiences. I came into contact with various mediums and channels who could find out what somebody planned before they were born. Every piece of the puzzle just suddenly fell into place.
Yeah.
And within a few months, I had left the corporate world and was working on the book that eventually became Your Soul's Plan. And then a few years later, wrote Your Soul's Gift. And now I have an entirely new life and a much more fulfilling life.
And we're so happy that you did write this book.
Well, thank you for saying that.
So, but isn't that so amazing what you're describing, how first it felt a bit stuck, like nothing was really happening. And then when you kind of woke up and you started to take action in your soul's purpose direction, then universe were kind of lining up with all these different events. That is exactly what happened in my life too. When I was in that old version of my life, nothing was working out, like nothing. I struggled with everything. But as soon as I woke up and I was like, okay, I gotta get out, I moved back to Stockholm where I was originally. Like there were so many things, and universe were lining up with an apartment, with my twin flame. There were so many things that were just like happening. And is that something that you describe when we're starting to live our, like, more in tune with our soul? Is that when things are more flowing?
And it does mean that. It doesn't mean everything is going to be perfectly smooth. That usually isn't the case in a lifetime on Earth, but it does allow all sorts of things to flow into your life. We were talking a few minutes ago about resistance. I can tell you that when I was doing the corporate work, I was very much in a state of resistance to my life. I didn't know it, but I was, because I didn't enjoy that work. I was energetically saying no to the work I was doing, and therefore I was energetically saying no to every other blessing the universe wanted to bring to me. I just wasn't letting any of it in. And it sounds like you were doing the same thing, also probably without realizing that that's what you were doing. So after I had the session with the medium, then I was open, I was willing. And you know, a little bit of willingness goes a very long way. The universe knows when you are open and willing, and then it rushes in with all of these wonderful blessings for you.
You were talking before about how the intuition. Oh yeah, before I ask that, I want to ask, because you said before you met the medium, you had this knowing that there must be something more to your life. That is exactly what I had as well. And sometimes people ask me, Linda, how does that knowing feel? And I don't really know. Like I'm saying, like, I just knew, and I just know certain things. How would you describe it? How did that feel for you when you knew?
I would use very much the same wording you just used. I knew, but I didn't know how I knew. And that is really a hallmark of being on a spiritual path. Many people, if you talk to them once they're on a spiritual path and you ask them, how did you know about whatever it might be, they will say, I knew, but I didn't know how I knew. Because the intuition just starts coming in. We don't quite understand how it comes in, or what the mechanism is that underlies that. So we don't know how we know, we just know. And really that's the important thing. You just need to know what the next steps are. How the knowing comes to you is something that isn't necessarily something that needs to be understood.
And when you were talking about physical sensations before, you said like start to tune in if there is any discomfort in your body. Would you say that that is working to the opposite as well? Like if something really resonates with your soul, do you ever like experience goosebumps and things like that?
Yeah, I have that experience. I think a lot of people do. There's just a feeling of calm, a feeling of ease in the body that tells you that this is the path for you, this is the right choice, the right action. You know, people often ask me if they have a major decision to make, how can they make the decision that their soul wants them to make, or that's consistent with their pre-birth plan? There's actually a very simple, easy technique you can use to do this that is very much along the lines of the question you just asked. Get a coin, and you say to yourself, it only works with a binary choice. You're either going to do something or you're not. But you say to yourself, all right, I'm going to flip this coin, and if it comes up heads, I will do whatever it is. If it comes up tails, I will not do whatever it is. Then you flip the coin. And what you're looking for is the feeling in your body before any thoughts come to your mind. When you see what the coin is telling you to do or not do, you're tuning into whatever you feel in your body before there's any thought. And if you do that, generally you will find one of two things. There's either a feeling of fear, which might manifest as a sort of tension or a constriction, or there's a feeling of joy or rightness, which feels to the body like peace or ease. So when you notice that feeling, as soon as you see whether the coin is heads or tails, that's something to really pay attention to. That is your soul communicating with you before the egoic mind kicks in with whatever story it's going to tell you.
Yeah, because that's the key, right? To be really, really quick in tuning into what it's telling. Because
That's right.
then the mind comes in with all the fears and the uncomfort in the body as well. But Robert, I see how much I have taken influence from your talks before, because this about a coin, I've been telling people about this, and I didn't actually remember that I heard it from you, but now when you were saying it, so I've told people like, yeah, I've heard this from a man. I can't remember who it was, but it was so cool. So yeah.
The important thing is just to remember the coin, not necessarily that I'm the one who said it.
But okay, so I'm gonna share something very personal that I'm going through now, because I always believe in sharing my story to help other people, and it's really, really emotional, but it connects so much to the fear in the mind, and then the knowing. So in my whole life, since I was a teenager, I wanted my breasts to be bigger. And back then, my mom, because we had such a good relationship back then, she was like my best friend. And I remember she said, like, if you want, when you get older, if this is still an issue, you can always go to a surgeon and fix it, if that is something you want to do when you get older. And I've had so much fear of doctors. And even since I was a little girl, I remember sometimes in the evenings, I was super, like, I had nightmares about being under anesthesia, or that somebody would take advantage of me. So there have been so many fear regarding doctors. So after she said that, I just blocked, like, no, going to a doctor to fix my breast is definitely not an option. And every time, like, when I started to talk with my boyfriend about these things, and he was like, I don't think that there is anything wrong with doing a breast augmentation. It's like, if somebody really wants it, of course there is that option. And my mind were like, no, I don't want to talk about this. There was like massive resistance. And then I started to understand that the resistance had been there because this was something that I truly wanted, but I had used so many layers of fear, so I didn't want to address the topic at all. So now at least I can address it. I can talk about it, even though it's emotional. But the wonderful thing in this story is that I have many colleagues that have experience of using hypnotherapy to make their breasts grow. And I know that it's possible to change our physical body by the influence of our mind's power. But my spirit in hypnosis have showed me a specific surgeon that it's telling me, like, Linda, you should go and do a breast augmentation at this specific clinic with this specific doctor. And he was telling me this in hypnosis. And then I found this specific doctor online when I was looking at the map in Australia. And I was like, wow, this is actually the man that I've been listening to on YouTube. So I could already see the connection there. And then I'm right now in the process of working with hypnotherapy, trying to make the breast grow. But there is still this inner knowing that I have to go and see this doctor in Australia. And for my mind, it definitely not makes sense, because it would be so much easier to just grow them naturally. That would be like definitely the better path. But my intuition is telling me, no, Linda, there is a reason why you have to see this man. You have healing that needs to take place with this doctor from past lives. And the only reason we could make you to meet with this doctor is that you wanted bigger breasts. That was the only reason how we could connect you two in this lifetime. Okay. So that's all the information I've got. So I would love to hear, just using this as an example, I would love to hear your point of view. Is this a case where you would say it doesn't make sense to the mind, but there can be a knowing that knows something else?
Yeah, very much so. And this is a great example of something that happens a lot, but people don't realize that's what's happening. And what I'm referring to is you have some kind of karma, something you want to balance with somebody from one or more past lives. And your guides, your helpers, your teachers, your higher self, they're all working on the other side to bring the two of you together. Sometimes it's easy to do. For example, if you've planned for that person to be your sibling or your mother or your father, well, then you're going to be in a nuclear family together, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to balance whatever you want to balance. But if the person has planned, say, to be in another country and not a relative of yours, then there's got to be some pretext or context for bringing the two of you together. And so spirit is very resourceful, as I said, very loving and very intelligent. they will find whatever reason they need to find to bring the two of you together. It sounds like that is what has happened in your case.
And this goes so well together with the whole thing of manifesting, because normally I would say with our mind that we can manifest anything that we want. And in this case, yeah, I would be able to manifest it if I did go and do the augmentation. But is there, because I also heard you in another interview where you were talking about law of attraction, and it was a woman asking you about money. And she said that if there has to be karma balance through money or something like that, it's going to be really hard for you to make money in this lifetime until you have healed that karma. And I think that relates to the same thing, that if my soul knows that I need to meet this doctor, then I'm not going to be able to grow my breasts naturally if I don't can solve all the karma on my own without meeting him.
So what you're saying reminds me of the healer in Brazil, John of God, who many people until recently regarded as perhaps the most powerful healer on the planet. And he's since gotten himself into some trouble. We won't discuss that today. But the reason I bring him up is that when people were thinking of going to his headquarters in Brazil for healing, he would often suggest to the person that they send a recent photograph of themselves. And then he would look at the photograph, and the non-physical healers who work with him would look at the photograph through the eyes of his body. And in doing so, they could tell whether or not the illness the person had was karmic in nature. Well, if it was karmic in nature, it was something that he, as a healer, could not heal. So he would put a little X next to the photo, mail it back to the person with an explanation saying, your illness is karmic in nature. You need to have the illness until you learn whatever it's here to teach you. And there's nothing I can do for you, because no healer anywhere in the world can remove an illness if it's karmic in nature. Now, if the illness was not karmic in nature, then he would write back to the person and say, I can help you, come to Brazil and we'll do some healing work here.
Wow, this is amazing. I had no idea about that. I have actually friends who have been to him in Brazil. So that's how I know about him. But I had no idea about that photo thing.
Yeah, that was the main means he used to tell people whether or not it made sense for them to come to Brazil. Because if you come with a karmic illness, not knowing that it's karmic, he's not going to be able to help in any way. And then you've spent all this time and money for no purpose.
Yeah. How would, what is, I have the techniques that I every time I heard somebody wise say, like, if you can see every person and situation as ascended teacher that is there to show you something that you can heal, then you don't have to get upset with any situation. You can always look within, and that is what I do. And my life really is much more easy when I look at things that way and see, like, wow, what can I grow and heal from this? Is that something that you use as well, or what are the techniques that you are using to kind of heal karma and heal yourself and your soul's journey?
Well, excuse me, the main thing I've learned from my work in the area of pre-birth planning is that when something that my mind interprets as negative or painful in some way occurs, I ask myself the question, if I planned this before I was born, why might I have done that? And when I ask a question like that, it immediately takes me to the deeper meaning and deeper purpose of whatever it is that's going on around me. And I like that particular phrasing for the question, because it doesn't require that somebody believe in the concept of pre-birth planning. So again, the wording is, if I planned this before I was born, why might I have done that? So you don't have to believe in pre-birth planning to ask that question, but it will still take you to the deeper meaning of whatever it is that's happening in your life. And then again, once you understand what the deeper meaning is, that takes you out of a state of resistance, which is painful and blocks other blessings from coming into your life. And once you have some sense of what the underlying spiritual meaning and purpose are, then you can go about learning those lessons in a much more conscious and much less arduous way.
Life become much more fun.
It does. That's exactly right. That's right.
It's almost like watching it as a movie. You know, when a movie gets really, really interesting, that's many times when things are really messed up for the person in the movie, right? and they were like, wow, this is very interesting. I wonder what will happen next. And when we are, I heard you say that question on an interview that I was listening to this morning. So I did say that. Actually, I said, like, so with my partner, I was like, if I planned this meeting with him before we came here, what was our purpose? And it came to me straight away. And it's a very, very beautiful question. So I can confirm for everybody listening that it works perfectly.
So what did you decide our purpose is in coming together today?
Well, he is really, like, I know now that I am in this lifetime for really working on showing my truth, to really live from unconditional love and understanding that my truth is enough. So I used to be, my whole life was a lie. Like, I was learned from a very young age that I always had to tweak the truth a little bit so it sounded better. And that's how I was brought up. So I was very, very afraid of telling my truth and going into this whole spiritual things and talking about now a breast augmentation, all of this stuff that is like really, really scary to my mind. But I know this is my purpose. And Jonas, my partner, he is definitely in my life to show me. Like, he can say sometimes, like, when we wake up in the morning, then he can say, like, oh, I was listening to you snoring during the night, and I love that so much that you snore, because that shows me that you're a human. So he is really sure. And I used to believe that in order to be good enough for a man, then I had to be a perfect princess that was like just perfect, whatever that means. But he is really showing me that, like, Linda, the more messy you are, the more I like you. So he is doing a beautiful job of showing me that.
Well, speaking one's truth is a lesson that many, many people are working on in this particular incarnation, and it requires courage. But if you know consciously that that's one of your lessons in this lifetime, it makes it a lot easier to do it. It's also one of my lessons, and it takes a more specific form. In my case, my understanding is that my lesson is to speak my truth courageously, but with loving kindness. As much as possible. So that's one of the things I try to do in life.
How do you define that it's coming from love and kindness? Like, how do you know that it's doing that?
Well, when I say speak my truth courageously, but with loving kindness, I'm talking specifically about the wording that I'm using and the tone, the energy that's behind it. There are a lot of different ways to speak one's truth, and you can do it stridently, you can do it angrily, you can do it with fear as the underlying energy, which is the case if you're doing it angrily, or you can do it with love, patience, empathy, tenderness, gentleness, compassion. There are a lot of different ways to say the same thing, and the underlying energy, which is determined by the underlying intention, is very, very important. Whenever you're considering a particular course of action, it's wise to ask yourself, what is my intention in doing this? And if you don't know what your intention is, then ask the universe to cause you to know what your intention is. The universe will always honor that request. And you will just come into this knowing of what your intention is. And then you can decide, is this an intention that I want to follow through on? Or is this not an intention that I want to follow through on?
Yeah, that's very beautiful. And I heard you say something this morning, again, when I was listening to an interview. You said if you want to talk to your spirit and you don't really know how to do it, you said to ask before you go to bed, right?
Yeah, dream work is something that I very much believe in and have done some of myself, and it really works. What I'm talking about here is you ask a question, speak out loud before you go to bed, and ask one question of your soul and guides. So if you want to know what your life plan is, that could be the question. What is my life plan? Then ask your soul and guides to give you a dream that night that answers your question. Then ask, and this is very important, ask to be awakened when the dream ends. Then keep either pen and paper or digital recorder next to your bed. If you wake up after a dream, write it down or describe it into the recorder. Otherwise, you probably won't remember it in the morning. This technique really works. It doesn't necessarily work every time you try it or the first time you try it. You may have to practice it for a while. And I always tell people, keep trying on consecutive nights as long as you don't get frustrated that it isn't working. Now, if you get frustrated, put it aside for a couple of weeks because frustration can block it from working. But as long as you're not frustrated, keep asking, and you will eventually get a dream that you'll just know intuitively, this is the answer to the question I asked. Then you will have to interpret the dream, which is another matter altogether and not necessarily an easy thing to do. But you'll know that that particular dream is the answer you were asking for.
Yeah, that is super beautiful, and it really really works because we train our mind when we do it repeatedly, as you say, as long as we don't get frustrated. But I was also, it was a while since I did that now, but it was also something I did in the beginning of my process, and it was really really beautiful. My dreams were showing me so much good stuff that was really really helpful. So how would you, again, you're coming in and using the words of pre-birth planning. So now I really want to get into that. How would you, because
Okay.
we have the mind, we have the subconscious mind, and then we have the soul. How would you describe this whole thing? So the soul is somewhere before it incarnates. Like, how is your understanding and your description of all of this?
Well, the soul is still here, even though you've incarnated. The soul is essentially a container for the physical body. So you have the physical body, and then you have the so-called etheric bodies that are outside it. There are different schools of thought here. The one that I'm familiar with is that the next layer out is the emotional body, followed by the mental body, followed by the spiritual body. Well, those etheric bodies that surround the physical body, that is your soul. It's a container for the physical body. So the soul is not off somewhere else, remote, removed, distant from you. You are your soul, and your soul is you. Uh, I forgot the original question now.
So so we're planning our lives before we come here, and then we come
Yes.
into the body, and then we also have the mind, and the mind is programmed to keep us safe and keep us within the tribe, and this is where the conflicts start. Not the
Yeah,
conflict.
so
Yeah.
you have the conscious mind, which some people call the egoic mind, uh, which at this particular time in evolution is quite fear-based. Then you have the subconscious, and then you have what some people call the superconscious, which is your soul and all the knowledge that's contained within your soul. This is what makes hypnosis so powerful, because when you go into the trance state, which means when you let go of the activity of the conscious mind, the egoic mind, then you have access to the super conscious mind, which is your soul, which contains all the wisdom of all the lifetimes you've had, both physical and non-physical. And this is why you talked about answers that came to you when you were in hypnosis. And I'm a hypnotist, and I practice something called a between lives soul regression, which is a form of hypnosis in which people can find out what they planned before they were born. That kind of information comes to somebody when the activity of the egoic mind is tamped down and they've connected with the super conscious mind. So in a between live soul regression, people talk to a group of beings known as the Council of Elders. The council knows everything that the person planned for this particular incarnation. And so people can find out, what did they plan? Why did they make those plans? How are they doing in terms of fulfilling the plan? How can they better fulfill the plan? Basically, any question you ask in that kind of state, the Council of Elders can answer, as long as it's for your highest good to know the answer. And you can find out why you chose your particular parents, your siblings, your friends, your teachers, your employers, your enemies, if in fact you have any enemies. All of these relationships are planned before birth, and in a between lives regression, you can find out why you plan those relationships.
When you started to connect with your guide, did you get a sense of less lonely? I found like I used to feel so lonely, and I found so many people, we feel so different, and we feel that we cannot connect, and we are totally disconnected. Like we were not even aware, but that's going on for many people. Did you also feel that when you started to connect with your guides, that you felt less lonely here on Earth?
Most of the time, there were still occasions where, because of whatever the circumstances were, I might feel lonely for a period of time. But after what I refer to as my spiritual awakening, I was much more consciously aware, much more of the time, of God, angels, masters, guides, my own higher self. Uh, and it did make life much less of a lonely experience almost all the time.
Yeah. I heard myself once before I went through the divorce. I remember I said to my ex-husband, I was like, I just want to go home. And he said, where is home? Is that Stockholm or where? And I said, I don't know. But as I said, I don't know, I kind of I knew like home was not on this earth. I didn't want to do suicide, but I was so feeling that I didn't fit in here on earth, and I just wanted to go home. And that has become a beautiful experience where I love my life here on earth because of the work I've done and connect with my soul and understand like, yeah, I planned it. And just because I know that you also, you could, after you understood that you had planned your challenges, then you could go back and look into your life, right, and see, wow, I planned this, and the reason I planned it was because of it. It made more sense.
It made a lot more sense. And as I said, it also created a healing around those challenges. And that was the primary motivation behind writing Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift. I thought, well, if this kind of perspective can create a healing for me, then it can also create healing for other people. And that was how I wrote the books. And that's also why I got into doing between lives regressions, because this was another way for people to find out the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of their lives. And it was a direct experience.
Yeah.
So once you've had an experience like that, you don't look at your life the same way anymore. You know that it's rich with meaning, even if occasionally you don't know what the meaning is.
Yeah. Yeah, and just that understanding helps earth life so much. So would you say that if somebody is really struggling with manifesting something that they want, and they have already done some of the subconscious work to release fears, because many times we're just not able to manifest because there are fears and blocks going on in the mind, but if all that work is done and it's still not working out, would you say that it's a really good thing to connect with the soul and see what the soul has planned?
I think that's a good thing to do, whether you've done that kind of inner work or not. You really cannot go wrong by connecting with your soul. And when I say connect with your soul, there are different ways to do that, but meditation is extremely, extremely important. I think the average person does not understand the value of meditation. They because they don't see the benefit immediately. They sit quietly, they close their eyes, they allow their mind to go quiet as much as they can, and then they say, well, what was that all about? I just lost 20 minutes. I could have been working during that time. Well, you don't necessarily see the benefits immediately. What is happening when you get quiet in meditation, it's an invitation to your guides, to your higher self, to step in and communicate with you, and seeds are planted, and then they germinate days, weeks, maybe even months down the road. So somebody will come into some great insight in regard to an issue or a problem in their life, and because the insight is coming so far after the meditation, they think it's their own brilliant insight. They have no way to identify that the seed was planted months ago in a meditation, but in fact it was. So I think if you want to be on your soul's path, on your soul's plan, so to speak, meditation is tremendously, tremendously important.
Yeah, beautiful. And how, so we have about 10 minutes because I told you 1 hour. So how would you say, like, when we're planning our lives as the soul, why do we do that? Why do we plan to come into earth, and why do we plan the meetings with different people, and how much do we actually plan, and how much is like, yeah, you understand.
Well, there's no short answer to the why. It took me over 800 pages and 2 books to answer that question, but I'll try to sum up. I found 5 main reasons planning specifically challenges before birth. One is to balance and release karma. A second one is healing. A third is service to others. A fourth is experiencing contrast. And a fifth is correcting false beliefs or false feelings about oneself. All 5 of these reasons are explored in depth in Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift. And by the way, I want to mention to your listeners, if you go to my website, yoursoulsplan.com, you can read large portions of both books for free. So just a good resource to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely.
But the basic answer to your question is that we're coming here to have experiences that teach us certain lessons. And very often the underlying lesson revolves around cultivating what I refer to as divine virtues. These are qualities that are important to the soul. In the workshop that I give that's based on my books, we do a particular exercise that I call the divine virtues exercise that gives people insight into the qualities they're working on. Your pre-birth desire to cultivate and then express those qualities while in body is one of the main reasons you plan your challenges before you were born. And as I examined many, many pre-birth plans for my 2 books, and also through my hypnosis practice, I noticed that certain virtues came up more often than others. I put together a list of the ones that came up the most. I think there's now 28 on the list. The divine virtues list is not intended to be exhaustive. There are many, many qualities we work on through a series of incarnations, but these 28 are the ones I've seen the most in my work. It's things like compassion, patience, empathy, acceptance, unconditional love, and so forth. The average person is working on 2 or 3 in a lifetime. Occasionally, there's somebody who's working on 4 or 5. The person who's working on 4 or 5 almost always has a life filled with trauma, but that trauma is there for a good reason. It's there to help them cultivate the virtues. And then the life plan calls for people to take the virtues they've cultivated and turn them outward in some form of service to others. The component of service to others is something that I've seen in literally every single pre-birth plan I've ever looked at. It's always there in one form or another to one degree or another. In other words, from your soul's perspective, it's not sufficient just to come into body and cultivate the virtues. Your soul wants you to do something with them once you've cultivated them, and the something is a service to others.
Yeah. And how, so when we are doing the service to others, is that in those relationships that we have planned before? So I know
A lot of it is.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I believe a lot of people are listening to Abraham Hicks, and they talk a lot about you got to serve yourself first. So many of us has this belief that I have to be everything for everybody else. But what I'm also talking about is like you gotta serve yourself first, give yourself like all the air, and then you can help others. But these are 2 different things, right?
Well, remember, there's only actually one being in the universe, and each one of us is a cell in the heart of the one being. So, what many people who are on a spiritual path do is they have a strong desire to be of service to others, but they don't include themselves in the service. They're so busy running around being of service to others, they don't engage in good self care, they don't take care of themselves. And if you don't take care of yourself, you don't have anything to offer other people when you're trying to serve them. So you have to remember, you're just as much a part of the one as everybody else that you're trying to serve. Include yourself in the service.
Yeah, that is really, really, really important to know.
It is very important.
Did you also feel that the time, yeah, you already mentioned meditation, so that's definitely a form of resting and calmness, because I see that so many people, when they're getting into this path and they're getting the insights, and how I used to be as well, I was like, I wouldn't listen to stuff the whole time, and I couldn't stop learning. I was just absorbing, but at one point it became just too much, and I realized like my body, my mind, and everything with me just needs to rest. Because when we get so super excited, it's almost like getting too much, and the time when we rest, right, it's when it actually can sink in. Is that something?
Yeah, you have to go through periods of doing and then periods of integration. In other words, periods of activity and then periods of rest. The rest is when you integrate the energies and the learnings that you've already received. And that's very, very important. In Western societies, I think there's a conditioning that takes place in which we're told that your value to society, your value as a person, comes from what you do. And certainly that's true to some extent. But if all you do is spend your time running around doing things and you never get quiet and just allow yourself to be, then you can't integrate what has been offered to you by spirit. And that is a very difficult way to live. And eventually, if you do that long enough, over a long enough period of time, it starts to create illness. And one of the main reasons illness happens is that it's your soul saying to you, slow down, spend some periods of time just being. You don't have to do all the time. It's vitally important.
And that is when it comes so many beautiful insights. Every time I sit down in meditation, it's like I'm getting bombarded with all. I always have to have paper and pen beside me because I'm getting all these beautiful messages like, Linda, do this, take this step, do that, talk to this person, and it's going crazy as soon as I allow my mind to actually rest.
Yeah, again, very important to let the mind rest, to let the body rest. We are not intended to be doing all the time. We are intended to alternate between periods of activity and periods of simply being. When you're back on the other side, before you come into body, you're very much aware of that. Meditation is just as important on the other side as it is here. The difference is that on the other side, everybody knows how important meditation is, but when you come into body, that's one of the things you forget. And so you need reminders that it's important to do.
Yeah. Have you got one clear message or some clear messages from your guides that have helped your life on earth to become easier?
Well, I think there have been a number of messages. Earlier on, there were messages to be less judgmental. I think that's something that I've worked on and am still working on. There are messages to speak my truth, again, courageously, but with loving kindness. There were certainly plenty of messages to write the 2 books, and then messages to get them out into the world and ways to go about doing that. There's been an ongoing, consistent message of rightness in regard to the work that I'm doing. Once I started on this path, I didn't think to myself, oh, I wonder if I made a mistake. I wonder if I should have stayed in the corporate world. There has been a feeling of rightness every step of the way, consistently and strongly, ever since I made the decision to do this kind of work. And I know that this feeling of rightness is my higher self and my guides saying to me, yes, this is the path for you, the path that you agreed to before you were born, the path that is of highest service to others and to yourself.
So if people have a knowing,
A knowing,
yeah,
right.
then definitely trust that, even though.
Yeah, and again, the knowing may be something that the logical mind doesn't like.
Yeah.
It may not make sense. You know, it reminds me when I decided to write my first book, I got strong guidance to move from Chicago, where I was living at the time, to a tiny little town in Oregon called Ashland. I had never been to Ashland. I didn't know anybody in Ashland, but it just kept coming again, strongly coming to mind. And when I looked at photographs of Ashland, Oregon online, I thought to myself, this is where I am supposed to go. It made no logical sense at all. I'd never been there, didn't know anybody there, but I packed up all my stuff and moved there, not knowing a soul there. And I have absolutely no doubt that this is where I plan to write my first book, because the energies there are supportive for doing that. So it made no logical sense, but it was the right move.
I had the same thing, like when we left Sweden 1 year ago, and when we took off, the whole time I was talking about so much, like I want to go to Bali, and it feels like Bali is the place to go. But then I was very afraid of Bali because I've heard of all the earthquakes, all the volcanoes, and like all these disasters. So my mind was really, really afraid. So we ended up going to Thailand. So we were there for 4 months. But when we finally decided to book the tickets to Bali, I couldn't sleep for like 2 nights because I was so truly excited. And I have one video on my phone where I got into the bathroom 4 o'clock in the morning one morning, and I was like, I'm so truly excited. I'm going to Bali. I'm going to go home. I have never been in Bali before, but I just kept like feeling I'm going home. And I definitely didn't know why, but a lot of healing and stuff has been going, like the stuff that I'm doing in my own journey. Still don't know exactly why I'm here, but I know that I'm here for a very, very important reason.
Yeah, and what you're doing is trusting. And I trusted when I moved to Ashland, Oregon. A lot of times, again, it makes no logical sense at all. But trust the feeling of rightness. That's your soul communicating with you and telling you, yes, this is the way for you.
Yeah. Well, this is such a beautiful ending of this conversation to really trust, and that was what we were talking about in the beginning as well. That inner knowing that led you to have the conversation with the medium that led me to leave my old life behind. And yeah, wow.
Well, I want to thank you for talking with me today, and I think you're performing a wonderful form of service to others by doing interviews like this. I have no doubt it's part of your soul's plan. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I feel like I'm so totally sweaty in my whole body. So it's like my whole intuition is like, this is so right. And I was so truly excited to do this talk with you. So thank you so much for taking the
You're
time.
welcome.
And
You're
as you
welcome.
said, if people want to read your books, they can go to your website, right?
YourSoulsPlan.com. In the main menu, click on the pages for Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift. That's the titles of the two books. You can also ask any library or bookstore, pretty much anywhere in the world, to order them in for you. And obviously, they're online at Amazon and other internet retailers.
Yeah, people can just buy them. They are so extremely
Yeah.
important, the information that is in these books. And also you will be doing workshops. So can people find out about that?
Yeah, at YourSoulsPlan.com in the main menu, there's a page that says events. If you click on that, the whole schedule for the next year is there. There are a lot of workshops coming up in the US, in Europe, in South America. So if people who are listening to this interview are in any of those locations, please think about joining us.
Amazing. Because as I said in the beginning, like it totally transformed my whole understanding and the manifesting stuff. It's just so amazing when we get that the understanding that the soul really has a plan, and it knows what it's doing, and that the universe is loving.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you, Robert. I'm sending you a big
You're
hug.
welcome. I send you a big hug right back.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, and I will go to bed
You
very
too.
soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.